And how does Mr. Rich Froning feel about this? I'm about to make a video on this. Your opinion would be sick. And then I told him what I thought the title of the video was going to be. 36-year-old Froning would have won the 2023 CrossFit Games. Yeah, I know the titles of these videos before I even start making the videos. Froning states that, yo, I make all these videos. Generally, they're just my opinion, and this is still going to be my opinion, but it's also going to be the opinions of a couple people who have some say in the matter, and that's going to be the person in which the video is being made about, Mr. Rich Froning. It's going to be Mr. Rich Froning Sr., and it's going to be Mr. Rich Froning's teammate, videographer, and the opinions of those people are going to be how they think that he would have done at the 2023 CrossFit Games competing as an individual. I kind of set it up to be one of those where if you were in peak CrossFit condition, if you were 36 years old, and if he wasn't doing all this bike riding, how would he have done? And it's a question that a lot of people really would have wanted answered for however many years, since the year 2014. People think that he probably could have won 2015. How would he have done in 2016 against Fraser, 17, 18, 19? It doesn't matter! Would Fraser still have won 5 in a row if Froning were around? No! And who would be considered the greatest all time? And Andrew, why are you making this just about Froning? Why isn't Fraser in part of this video? How would Fraser have done at the 2023 CrossFit Games? Well, I think that it's way harder to kind of figure out how he would have done, because Froning is still relatively close to being in what would be considered peak CrossFit shape. I mean, hell, this year in the CrossFit Open, I think he finished in the hundreds, but it's only because of that thruster. He hit a thruster in the mid to 60s, and the only reason that wasn't any higher is because he just had some sort of a shoulder repair. But if you change that number to something close to what you think he could have done, close to 300, maybe a 295er, then all of a sudden he's in the top 10 in the Worldwide Open again. Something that he's done every single year. And then you look at the quarterfinals as the 35 to 39-year-old division. I think he finished second at each of those stages. And remember, he wasn't entirely healthy. Maybe that's why he was doing the bike riding, but we're going to assume here that he would have been healthy for the games. And I know I kind of brushed over the Fraser thing, but it's very hard to imagine him being in any sort of CrossFit condition, any sort of CrossFit shape. It's almost like the second that he was done competing after he'd won his 5th title, he just sat on his butt and didn't do anything and lost every bit of muscle mass that he had. And then he decided to build up the business and started that stuff. That's all cool. And then he blew out his knee doing some sort of jiu-jitsu or wrestling, who knows what that was, but he's in no shape to be competing, which is weird because he put up that post the other day and it almost alludes to the fact that he's going to be making some sort of a comeback. And while it was just bench press at 280 pounds and then some bike urging, it kind of felt like maybe that would be happening, but I don't think there's any chance in hell that that dude could ever make any sort of a comeback, especially if you're taking however many years off and having torqued out his knee the way he did. But right back to Rich Froning, because that's what this whole video is about. Yeah! He has kept himself in shape, and we brought up those open numbers, and Andrew, you said the open doesn't matter. Yeah, I said that, but Jeff Adler did win the open pretty handily this year by 100 or 200 points. And then he ended up going to win the CrossFit Games. So the open, while I don't think it matters, maybe it has something where if you beat everybody in the world at one point, you could still beat everybody in the world a couple of months down the road at the CrossFit Games. Sure, it might not stack up the way that I would like it to, all neat, and there aren't enough workouts, and people across the board don't care as much. They're not repeating them to get the best out of themselves. But there were other stages of competition where Froning was competing as an individual where people really did care, and those were the sanctionals of 2020. Sure, that's about 3 years ago, but you really didn't get very much Froning, and how did he compare? And especially now that the open doesn't matter, those placings in the top 50 amongst the entire world, they really don't mean as much. But in the sanctionals in 2020, where he had him at CrossFit Mayhem, while he wasn't competing as an individual, and while he was the one who created those workouts, he competed in 4 of those 7 events, in which he finished first, second, and second. And the reason I'm bringing this stuff up is because he can compete against the best of them, and of which people, Jeff Adler was there. This is a Jeff Adler of 3 years ago. Jeff Adler, the current CrossFit Games champion, the one of which he would be trying to compete against this year at the Games. This is a Jeff Adler that was competitive at this level, and he was 3 or 4 years removed from that giant story where he was a volunteer at the Games. Volunteer Jeff Adler, 2016 or 2017. A couple years later, he's at Mayhem, and Rich Froning's whooping his butt as an individual on workouts that are suited towards him because he did create him, but still he's giving him a whooping. How would they have stacked up 3 years later at the CrossFit Games? That's what all this is going to be about. And before we get into it, how does Mr. Rich Froning Sr. feel on the matter? I asked him. Huh? What's up, Rich? Curious of your opinion on something. If Rich was in peak CrossFit shape this year at the age of 36, do you think that he would have won the games in the individual field? Interesting question, Mr. Senior says. I think that would be interesting to watch. I do think that he would have won it all, but I'm saying that not to take any away from Jeff, Pat, or Roman. Rich, when competing, has a mental switch that flips on, and there are only a few that I have seen that have that. Just my opinion. I then asked him if it was cool if I shared this in the video. He said it was okay, and then he also admitted that he has a biased opinion, and of course he does. It's his freaking dad. But I think that those closest to you could either be the most critical, which is the most realistic, or maybe they can have their head in the sky and say, oh, of course he'd win the games. And I think that Mr. Rich Froning Sr. might be a little more critical than on the head in the sky, just saying, oh, of course my son would win. I think that if Rich weren't gonna win, he'd be the first one to tell him. But maybe I have a biased opinion as well. And speaking of biased opinions, it's probably only fair that I tell you this about this year's CrossFit Games. I look at these workouts, and if you've watched any number of these massive amount of videos that I've done, you'll know that I've been rather critical of certain things in the CrossFit system. One of those things has been the programming. And when I look at the programming, the biggest thing that I've always said is that if you look at the workout and you don't know what it is, then you're too far removed from what CrossFit is supposed to be, which is simple. What is Fran? 2159 to freaking thrusters and pull-ups. What is Murph?
Don't let me leave, Murph.
You do some running, you do some push-ups, some pull-ups, and some squats. All right, we get it. And this time last year, I was looking at the CrossFit Games workouts, and a handful of them, along with some of the workouts from this year, so you look at these things and you go, what is going on? What are we doing here? The reason I make this video is because I think this year's programming is very Froning friendly. Froning friendly. I do not think that the year 2022 was very Froning friendly. What do you mean by that, Andrew? Well, I look at these workouts, and there's that screen on the Games website, and on that screen you can just look at all of them and you either know what the workouts are or you don't. And when you look at the workouts in 2022, there's a handful of workouts that really just stand out at you, and it's the one with the single-legged squats and the crossover double unders. The alpaca is kind of long, and then you look at the back 9, which is kind of long, and you look at echo press, and it goes, okay, block handstand push-up, but it's also a wall-facing handstand push-up, and you wouldn't know that by looking at it. There's hat trick, which is entirely confusing, and you gotta really figure out the intricacies of. You gotta go to the notes section to figure it out. You can't just look at these workouts as the shuttle to overhead. What's going on? How do you score this? It's the number of jerks. Okay, the Jackie Pro. It doesn't even say on there that there is a minimum time requirement spent on the rower, which is another little intricacy. It's not just a workout. It's something that I really liked from CrossFit for a while, and I think that it's something that is entirely different in the year 2023, and it's going to completely change how I think somebody like Froning would have done on these workouts, especially something like Jackie Pro, where you had to finish that 1K under, what was it, a minute 40 pace. You had to finish it under 3 minutes and 20 seconds, or else you were done with the workout right there. He is the pacing guy. He is the guy that does well on every single one of these workouts since the dawn of time. He is Mr. CrossFit. And if you change the pace at which he's got to go, or you got to do this weird shuttle to overhead movement, or you've got to do these weird crossover double unders along with these single-legged squats on one leg, which he said is one of his least favorite movements, you think that maybe a Bosman strictly programmed CrossFit Games isn't going to be something where he's going to do well. But that's not this year, isn't it? Mr. Dave Castro's back.
It's the one and only Digo Double G. Snoop Dogg.
Mr. Dave Castro, who programmed all the years that he had won, and most of the years, the exception being last year, which was exclusively Bosman. And the other day, Bosman was on the Coffee Pods and Wads podcast. Mr. Pedro asked Bosman a question.
I heard a rumor that double under crossovers were supposed to be in one of the workouts, and heavy doubles came up instead. Is that true?
Mr. Pedro asked him about the crossover double unders, and then the conversation developed into...
I mean, it's a half truth. That was that final pull event. I think
Bosman talked about the inverted melody and parallel bar pull. Of course, that's the heavy double unders.
I'm trying to think the other one. Maybe the inverted medley. Those were the two that probably had the most testing variations. And so there were like a bunch of different iterations. So I don't think it's fair to say it was supposed to be anything. We experimented with a bunch of different versions of it, and ultimately that's the one we landed on.
Which there was speculation that those were maybe supposed to be crossover double unders.
I heard a rumor that double under crossovers were supposed to be in one of the workouts, and heavy double.
And then inverted melody is a workout where you look at it and you're kind of thinking, what's going on? I remember I was sitting at dinner with Ariel Lowe, and I go, can you understand this thing?
I'm watching it right now. Unbroken. I love it.
Really?
Which reminds me of the year 2022, which is why all of that stuff that I just said was so important. You can't look at it and just know what you're going to do, which means that I think that was very Bosman-esque. I think that the parallel bar pull workout, if there were crossover double unders in there, would have been very Boz-esque. It's like, what is a crossover double under? How are we even supposed to do that? You gotta watch this film, figure it out. But everything else, like pig chipper, ski bag, Helena, Olympic total, intervals, all of these things, they're really something that we've become accustomed to. And when I say become accustomed to, I mean, they got Dave's name all over it. The entire thing is simple, you understand it, at least way more simple and way more understandable than it was last year. And in my opinion, that makes it more CrossFit. And if it's more CrossFit, then I think Froning will do better at it. And that sparked the entire video idea right here. And it really got me going. And now I can finally tell you how I think he would have done. We're gonna go event by event. And I'm not just gonna do it by myself. I'm not just gonna say, hey, this is how I think he would have done. When I was talking to Froning himself, he said there's a guy over at his camp. His name is Ben Davidson. He was on the CrossFit Mayhem Independence team. I think it was Independence. Maybe it was Justice. Mayhem Justice. He's also one of the videographers over there. He's got a cool camera. And Froning said that he's got quite a bit of insight into this topic. How would Froning have done? It's the conversation that they had. So he pointed me in his direction. So Ben Davidson filled me in on how he thought that Froning would have done this year. And yeah, I'm saving the Rich Froning bit for last, so you stick around for the whole freaking video. And the unique thing about this is Ben told me how he thinks Froning would have done. And I had already written down how I thought he would have done, event by event. So I'm going to tell you what I thought. I'm going to tell you what Ben thought. We're going to go event by event, and then I'm going to give you the point total at the end of it. I'll tell you why I thought so. And I really can't speak too much about why Ben said that Froning would have done as well as he did on certain events, or as poorly as he would have done on certain events. But we're going to start with ride. The bike ride. 40 minutes. How would he have done? I thought he would have finished 10th. Davidson thought that he would have won the thing. My headspace on the matter is one of which Froning was not getting ready for this Leadville bike ride. Maybe Davidson was a little bit different. And if Froning was in peak CrossFit shape, there wouldn't have been all this bike riding. So I think that he would have finished 10th, giving him 73 points. Of course, he gets 100 points with Ben Davidson, thinking he would have finished first. Pig chipper. 4th place for me, 5th place for Davidson. And I'm going to let you know right now that Davidson gave me, I think he would have won these events, and then I think he would have finished in the top 5 or in the top 10, or maybe he would have finished in the top half on this other workout. So there are these breaking points here, and I gave a much more precise placing. The reason I gave that on pig chipper is because it's just a couple of pig flips. It reminded me of the green weird flip sled that they had after that run, and I remember Froning was able to move that thing rather well. He was keeping up with Kalipa while Kalipa ran away with it. If it weren't for the run that had started that thing off, I think Froning would have had a shot at winning it. He's just some wall balls. It's a couple of pull-ups and toes to bar. It's stuff that he can smash. It's a good finish for him, in my opinion. Top 5, I gave him 4th. That's good for 91 points. Compared to Davidson's 5th place finish, so we were pretty close there. Inverted melody. Davidson thought that he would have won. I said he would have finished 3rd. When I say 3rd, and when I give a lot of these placings, it's because if he would have dominated it at a certain point in time, maybe he's the best on his hands. He spends every other day upside down for, I don't know, a half hour at a time. How can you assume he wouldn't have done that well? Well, I look at the times. I don't think that he would have ever had a chance to pass Cole Greasehaber with that 3:47. I think that was untouchable. There's Medeiros at 4:03, but then there's a third break. There's this big 20-second gap between Medeiros and 3rd place. I think Froning would have slotted in right there. Yes, he is incredibly good on his hands, but I don't think that he would have beaten those two on this workout. I don't know if Davidson had the headspace about how people had actually done on this before he said, yeah, I think he could have won, which maybe he could have. But either way, we were rather close on that one as well. This is the next workout, the alpaca, where we were the farthest off. I think that on the alpaca, Froning would have finished 18th, giving him 49 points, where Davidson thinks that he would have finished 5th, giving him 84 points. Why do you think he wouldn't have done well on the alpaca, Andrew? Well, kettlebells. Not that I don't think that he's going to do well with the kettlebells, but I think he's more of a barbell-centric human being. I also saw Luke Parker suffering on the sled, and I mean, Luke Parker trains with Froning, Sam Cornway trains with Froning. I don't think Sam Cornway did very well in this event. Let's see, how did he do? Yeah, he finished freaking 25th on this workout. Luke Parker gets smashed by the sled. Cornway doesn't do well. They're all from the same camp. If there were to be a workout Froning wouldn't do well on, it would be the one without the barbell, where the kettlebells are the big holdup. He's great at legless rope climbs, right? But this is a sled pushing, kettlebell flinging freaking workout. He'd finish better than those two because he is much better at legless rope climbs than them. And in my opinion, maybe this is where Ben Davidson shows a little bit of his Froning bias. Maybe. And then we got ski bag, where I think that he would have finished 8th. Davidson thinks he would have finished 10th. And we're right back to being eerily close to where we think he would have finished on these. It's just hard for me to see him not finishing well on a workout that's just squatting and skiing. Helena, I got him at 9th. Davidson had him at 10th. I got him there because while I think that he could do rather well keeping the freaking movements unbroken, he's not going to be able to push the pace on the run. He also isn't going to be able to push the pace on the movements. Dumbbell snatches unbroken are great. Bar muscle ups unbroken are great. And running that run at about a 6-minute mile pace is good. But Adler was pushing the pace on all those things and just slaughtering the dumbbell. That's not something that I see in Froning's arsenal. Still good for a top 10 though. Cross country run. Oh yeah, Mr. Froning in the run. We already talked about how he didn't do well at that freaking flip event in 2013 against Kalipa, and it was because of the run. We know that He walked in 2014 with that run. So yeah, I got him in 14th right here. And this is the one where Davidson said he thinks he finishes in the middle of the pack. So 15th is a 45-pointer for him, 48 points for me. When we look at the placings on the leaderboard, he's right with the two-time champ at that point, Justin Medeiros, finishing at 1751, which, yeah, it's really hot, and yeah, they've done a couple of workouts, but that's really something along the lines of maybe a 6:10, 6:15 minute mile pace, and I think that's totally feasible for somebody like Froning. On the intervals workout, I got him in 5th, Davidson's got him in 10th. Earlier in the video, I talked about the Mayhem Classic where they had those tall box jump overs. It's something that they do all the time over at Mayhem. I've looked at the What's Rich Doing programming. I've looked at Mayhem's affiliate programming, and I just know that this is something that would be more conducive than you think to somebody like a Froning. Andrew, he's the pacing monster. Right, so he's going to do better on the second part of that event than anybody else is. And he'll pace that first one, but he'll still have a pretty good finish. Olympic lifting. All right, this is the one that's interesting because we talked about that thruster in the open. We assume peak CrossFit shape. What is the best that we can get out of Froning in an Olympic lift in the 2023 CrossFit Games as a 36-year-old? What is it that Davidson said his lifts were? Because I have mine listed right there. Davidson said that he's probably good for a 285 snatch and a 350 plus clean and jerk, which is crazy because I wrote that he's good for a 285 snatch and a 355 clean and jerk. In the quarterfinals just this year, where his shoulder may not have been good on that heavy thruster, he hit a 352 clean and jerk, and that was at the end of that workout where they had to do the shuttle runs in the rowing. Or maybe there was a different workout, but it was a workout followed by a clean and jerk. They had to do it in the certain time domain. He said it's the heaviest one that he's hit in some time. But I can imagine that on the second portion of the Olympic lifts, he opens at something like a 335, which is what Medeiros opened at. Just something that Froning could have probably hit out of the womb. It's something that you've never seen him miss. And then he'd go for something like that to put himself in a good position to make a push on the final day. The snatch, I think he hit a 291 in the team competition in what was it, 2021? Maybe it was 2022. It's one of those lifts where you probably just won't lose the ability to do a certain weight, and I call that weight 285 for someone like a Froning. Those numbers put him exactly in 6th place, giving him 80 points for myself, and for Mr. Ben Davidson, he said he'd finish top 5 on that event. And again, I have the ability to look at the numbers and plug them in right where I think he would have finished. Davidson just said top 5, which is cool. Muscle up logs. We're starting up the final day. This is the one where he usually makes a push. He sees that he's got a chance to potentially win the CrossFit Games as a 36-year-old, so I gave him a 3rd place on muscle up logs. He's going unbroken on every set of those muscle ups. I bet a lot of people are. This kind of reminds me of the workout again at the Mayhem Classic where he obliterates everybody other than my buddy Dylan. He can throw around a sandbag, just chuck it up and over. Everyone else is starting to get gassed. He works out 30 times a day, so he's able to push, but he isn't able to push past some of the people up at the top. Jeff Adler takes him on that one because nobody was going to touch him, but I totally think that he can finish 3rd. Davidson thinks that he's going to finish 5th. Parallel bar pull. Davidson says he's going to win this one. I don't think so.
Is that what you think? You think?
Because you got Brent Fikowski and Patrick Vellner at the top. These kind of big monkey looking dudes that can just yank the crap out of a sled. Freaking gymnast in the past, Mr. Vellner, flying around on the P-bars. And while some of you guys are going to try to mention the workout against Bridges where they were doing the handstand push-ups and the sled pull from 2012, 13, or 14 way back then, that's Josh Bridges. This is not the same sort of an athlete as a Brent Fikowski or Patrick Vellner. Bridges is freaking this tall, and Froning got beaten by him. Imagine if Bridges were this tall. He would have smashed him, but then he probably also wouldn't have done as well in the handstand push-ups. But in any world, I give Froning a 3rd. Davidson thought that he has a chance to pull that one out. And then we're on the event finale. Echo thruster. Mr. Ben and I both agree that he's going to win this one. Never seen an event finale that Froning didn't win where it finishes with an overhead walking lunge. Some echo bikes, some thrusters, they're whatever. Doesn't matter. If he's in that position, he's winning that workout. Doesn't matter if Roman's there. Doesn't matter or if Adler's there. Doesn't matter what's going to go on. It doesn't matter how far away he is. He's going to give himself a chance to win. He's going to win that finale. When it's all said and done, what do the points turn out to be, Andrew? What are the points looking like? Add all up Ben's points, he's got him at 987. And while they weren't quite as exact as my points, that gives him a lead of what, 30-something points over Adler at the end of the weekend. The thing that we can't take into account here is how that would have shifted everybody else. Would it have moved Adler up or down a couple? I don't know. Would it have moved other people up and down a couple, giving Adler different points? points and maybe giving Vellner or Roman different points. I don't know. It's hard to say. It doesn't matter. But there is quite a bit of a buffer there, and it totally alludes to Froning would have won the CrossFit Games this year. Me, myself, 954 points. 1 point more than Jeff Adler. No, I did not go through and make that happen on purpose. I legitimately went number by number, spot by spot, and said, how do I think you would have done? How would I think I would have done? And legit, he would have beat Adler by 1 point. And again, same thing that I said about freaking Ben Davidson's numbers. You can't account for where the other people would have shifted. It's just where I would have plugged him in. But still, damn good chance that if Froning were competing at the 2023 CrossFit Games, at least in my opinion, Ben Davidson's opinion, and the opinion of Rich Froning Sr., Mr. Rich Froning is going to have a shot, if not win, the 2023 Games. And how does Mr. Rich Froning feel about this? What did he say? Mr. Rich Froning Jr. says, after I asked him, I'm about to make a video on this. Your opinion would be sick. If you were in peak CrossFit shape at your current age, competing against an individual, how do you think you would have done at this year's Games? And then I told him what I thought the title of the video was going to be. 36-year-old Froning would have won the 2023 CrossFit Games. Yeah, I know the titles of these videos before I even start making the videos. Froning states that based on his peak shape health of 2019, I think that I could have definitely done pretty well with this year's programming. And then I texted him, I go, hey, you think your dad would have an opinion? And he goes, yeah, dad always has an opinion. Just depends on whether or not it's a good one. And then he let me know about Ben Davidson, who said he does a critique of his fitness and programming every year, so he's pretty objective and would have good insight on that, so I reached out to him. And you knew about that already, but as of right now, Froning thinks that based on his peak shape health of 2019, that he thinks that he could have definitely done pretty well this year. And I think that it's crazy how I was thinking about the Mayhem Classic, and I do think that was 2020 when that was going on. Maybe it was 2019. Let's confirm that. CrossFit Mayhem Classic. January 2020. So that's like 2019, 2020. Maybe him and I are talking about the same period of time. Maybe he's referencing the way that he had done, and I should have asked him this, at that competition where he was kind of laying waste to the field. Granted, they were his own workouts, but it is something that everybody has wondered. How would he have done year after year? I think that if Froning had stayed around for 2015, 16, 17, 18, and done every single year as an individual number one, his body wouldn't be all that happy with him anymore.
What did you say?
Number two, I think Fraser doesn't have 5 titles. I think Fraser might have 2 or 3. I think there are a couple years where you can make no doubt that there's no way that Froning would have beaten Fraser given the point discrepancy and given Fraser's dominance. But I do think that if they would have stayed together and competed against one another for a decade, all the way up until this point in time where I think that he still has a chance to win the CrossFit Games, Froning has a number of titles where Fraser was not competing. There would have been years in which they were competing against one another, to which we know Froning has the advantage 1-0. And then if there would have been a 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 6 more seasons where they were competing against one another, potentially a couple of more being the years that Medeiros had won. We had 8 years right there where they could have had a heads up, but right now it's just Froning 1, Fraser 0. I bet that Froning may have been able to sneak out that 2015 year where Fraser just wasn't trying that much, and then it would have been Froning 2, Fraser 0. What would it have looked like the next year? Hard to say. And let's just say that you disagree with me. Maybe you disagree with Froning. Maybe you disagree with Froning's dad. Maybe you disagree with Froning's teammate, cameraman, whatever you want to call Ben Davidson. At the very minimum, you have to admit that it's kind of cool that there's the possibility that there's a chance that somebody like Froning, who hasn't competed as an individual, who you can look at, who's riding bikes, doing other things at this point, could still be doing this stuff. As always, please share your thoughts, opinions, and concerns in the comment section. Let me know how wrong or right you think that I could be. But remember, this time, you're not just telling me that I'm wrong, you're telling Froning, his dad, and his cameraman that they're wrong too. Andrew Hiller, out.
They smash that like but no one touches their nasty legend.
Just do it! Make your dreams come true! Just do it! Some people dream of success, while you're gonna wake up and work hard at it. Nothing is impossible. No, what are you waiting for? Do it! Just do it! Yes, you can!